Thanks, Hannah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to speak to you today about human nature and the secret to transforming customer experience. My name is Hannah. There might be some familiar people listening today that I've seen before, but if we haven't met, it's lovely to meet you virtually. I work for the company TOPdesk. My role, as Tessa said, is I work mainly as a consultant with a focus on the education sector, so with universities and colleges, but I also work internally as an agile coach, sort of promoting our agility as a company in our ways of working. And throughout both of these roles, a lot, especially actually when I'm consulting with education organisations, I found that customer experience is really important, of course, but one of the key elements to having successful customer experience is having an understanding of human behaviour and human nature, whether that's because we're rolling out self-service portals, promoting knowledge bases, trying to bring new behaviours on board. Human nature has always been the key to the success of those kind of projects, and it's always fascinated me as well, if I'm honest. So today what I wanted to do with you is share some observations that I've made over the years about human behaviour when working on these types of projects, observations that I think they help us better understand how our customers think, whether our customers at any one moment, could be a student, it could be a member of academic staff, of teaching staff, could be each other, could be us working in teams. We're all humans with beautifully human characteristics, and the more we're aware of those and those human behaviours, the more it helps us make small, meaningful changes that have a direct impact on customer experience. So I wanted to share with you three observations today that keep coming up again and again when I work in education. And I thought, well, let's just get started with the first one. Let's jump straight in. First observation is this: an emotional connection matters more than customer satisfaction. Bit controversial, that one, I think, perhaps. I'm thinking, oh, what is this rubbish all about? Let me explain what I mean. If we are able to connect emotionally with a customer, that actually is more important to the customer than the intricacies of the service or the actual physical product that they hold in their hand. Emotional connection can be so positive that it actually can trump negative experiences that they might have as part of that service, which is amazing, because that's how powerful it really can be. And I had an illustration that I wanted to share with you that explains this in a little bit more detail. And I would wager that a lot of us listening have had first-hand experience of this particular illustration if you have ever owned a cat. Let me introduce to you something called the cat paradox. It's known in the world of customer experience and user experience. And it asks the question, why do people like cats? I should probably own up as well before I wade into the cat versus dog debate. I'm actually a rabbit person. I have pet rabbits at home, so I can consider myself strictly neutral. But the stereotype of what you hear is that cats are not massively user-friendly. Their customer experience isn't that great. They are quite known, aren't they, for sort of looking down on you, being quite aloof, producing hairballs and scratching, and not being massively affectionate in return. So ask the question again, why do people like cats? Well, cats, as it turns out, are extremely good at forming an emotional connection with humans, and they've actually figured out over time, they've evolved so that their meow matches perfectly with the frequency of a human child crying. So they can almost like sort of manipulate and tap into that part of our brain, our human brain, that wants to nurture and wants to protect our cats. And this strong emotional connection trumps any bad behavior or the sort of bad customer or user experience that comes with a cat. So where cats in this example are the product or over the service, that emotional connection matters more than the customer satisfaction of the cat, which I know sounds weird, and obviously it's designed to be a bit of a funny example, but we see this happening in the workplace as well. There was a really big study done back in 2015 by Harvard Business Review, and they reached out to thousands of different customers and investigated lots of different brands that those customers used, and they found that if a customer was emotionally connected to a brand, they were more loyal to it, they shopped with them more regularly, they were more likely to advocate for that brand off their own backs, and interestingly, they were less sensitive to price, so they were willing to pay more money even though they could get the same thing somewhere else for cheaper. And they were much less sensitive to waiting times or unexpected delays and that sort of thing. So we can see this with our own services too. Sometimes there are unexpected waiting times. Sometimes we can our customers will experience a bit of back and forth or a complicated internal process, and they're much more likely to forgive that if they feel understood, if they feel appreciated, if they feel like they've been connected with and that they're being dealt with like another human. So the better we can fulfill this sort of human need for emotional connection, the happier our customers will be, despite things that might go wrong, which I think is pretty amazing, really. You might be thinking, of course, to yourself, okay, well, how can I be more cat? How can I emotionally connect to our customers? And that same sort of research that I mentioned before, done by the Harvard Business Review, they actually identified hundreds of something that they called emotional motivators, which drive the experience and drive our connection with people, with teams, with brands, and that sort of thing. I've got on the slide here the 10 most significant that this research brought up. I've also put a reference at the bottom there if anyone is interested in this. It's really, I think, really interesting. You can read the paper. It's called The New Science of Customer Emotions. But these 10 were certainly found to be the ones that made the biggest difference. And so what I like to do if I'm working with an organization is challenge them. If you want to improve your customer experience, pick just one of these 10 emotional motivators and explore how you can incorporate it into a very specific product or service. An example of this, take the very top one, stand out from the crowd. Say you were to pick the service, new laptop request or new equipment request, something like that. I've seen people come up with really good ideas to help a customer feel like they stand out from the crowd by, like, leaving a little personal note on the laptop with a post-it note. So when they pick it up, they've got a little note on it. You might have noticed actually sometimes hotels will do that. They'll leave a little note for you in your room. Things like being able to check in with them after they've received a new piece of equipment to make sure that everything is working for them. Do they need any extra training? These little things like that really will help us emotionally connect with our customer. One that I really like from this list as well, which I think is particularly relevant, is this one here, protect the environment. And again, using the example of a sort of new equipment or new laptop request, are we delivering or sourcing that equipment with a minimal environmental effect? Are we partnering with suppliers who have their own commitments to the environment, and maybe they're trying to reach a net zero target themselves? Probably a lot of us, we already do that, but actually in some cases our customer bases, our students and staff, they just don't know that that's something that we do. Protect the environment as well, I brought it out because especially with the the generations that are in the workforce at the moment and joining the workforce, so millennials and Generation Z, this is so important to them. And we actually use this emotional connection internally in TOPdesk recently. We were trying to promote a new or get buy-in for a new HR online service portal. And we did a sort of hidden treasure hunt in the portal where you had to find clues and letters. Once you found it, the department would actually plant a tree for you. So then TOPdesk ended up planting X number of trees for all the people. And obviously it helped create buy-in and get people engaged with the service we wanted to promote, but we're also tapped into that emotional motivator of protecting the environment as well. So little things like that can really make a difference. So have a think about your own services, your own products. What quick wins can you do that will tap into these emotional motivators and form a connection with your customers? Because don't forget, an emotional connection matters more than customer satisfaction. Which leads me on now to the second of the human nature or human behaviours that I wanted to discuss with you today. This is perhaps one that we can all relate to. It's called, we are hardwired to take the easiest path. We all want an easy life, right? It's easier if it's easier for us to go around something than go over it. We'll do it. I mean, we can't help it. I think I like to think it's down to evolution. We want to make things easy for ourselves. From a customer experience point of view, this is a really important bit of human nature to know, because if we want to give our customers the best possible experience, it must be as easy as possible. So if we're rolling out new products, new services, trying to encourage new behaviours, if it's not easy, you'll tend to see people will take a different path. They'll start to take a path that they think is easier. An example of this, or a question I suppose I should say, that I hear a lot working with universities especially, is, why is our use of the self-service portal so low? I can't understand it, because the evidence tells us that people want to self-solve, right? We did a survey in TOPdesk in 2020. We asked 500 random organizations, and the stats came back that 72% of the customer base want to self-solve. They want to be able to do that for themselves. And yet, what we found was that the communication channel, in fact, I wonder if you can guess. Can you guess what the most important communication channel is for our users on average? I wonder if you'll be surprised by this. So in this survey, we asked people what's the most important communication channel with our customers, and the number one that came back wasn't self-service, even though we can see that people want it. It was actually email. Perhaps you're not surprised by that. I wasn't, I must admit, when I saw it. It was email, closely followed number 2 by telephone, number 3 was social media, number 4 was in person, number 5 was chat. And I should mention this is like not a chat bot, it's more like a one-on-one chat through a window, not a physical window, it was a digital window. And coming in 6th place was self-service or sort of website self-help. And that for me was a really sort of pertinent illustration of this example, that people tend to take the easiest path. Even though there's a desire and a want for self-service, when you delve into the data further, people pick email because it's easy, because they feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing, I'll just send them an email and then it's off and not my problem anymore. Now, you and I know in reality, email is not easier. The typical customer experience of an email is there's a lot of back and forth, there's longer waiting times whilst that email is triage. You often have to struggle to get back in touch with that customer to get more information. Email is definitely not easier in reality, but because people think that it is, they're going down that easy path. So what can we do then to do things like make self-service the easier choice? How can we make it so that, you know, the easiest way is actually the way that we want people to take? And one way that you can do this is to make the alternatives harder so that other ways become easier, if that makes sense. And I want to share with you an example of this. This might sound a little bit of a no-brainer, but I always hear when I speak to universities, people being quite nervous about doing this. So I wanted to sort of reassure you that this is a good thing to do and can make a difference. And that's to have your emails go out from a no reply. So when you're logging a ticket or asking for an update or whatever it might be, when that email goes out, make sure it comes from a no reply. Put a little line of text in that says, please do not reply to this email. You could even have an automatic bounce back in case someone does reply. It's a really simple way that you can start to make it, oh, actually, it's not that easy for me to email. Another way you can do it as well is to actually look in more detail at the content of the emails that you send to your customers. This is what we recommend at TOPdesk, a really basic, simple email template that will just say something like this: dear person, you have an update on your ticket, and then a massive big button to tell them to open their ticket. There's nothing in that email about what the update is. There's no real information that's useful in that email whatsoever, just the big green, in this case, button that when they click on it, takes them straight to the update in the self-service portal. And after a few emails of doing this, people start to learn, oh, actually, I'm going to go straight to the portal this time, straight somewhere to see an update or write an update or look for a form, because you're sort of building in, actually, this is a much easier way to do things. And interestingly, I don't know if everybody experiences this, but I find that this approach to kind of making email quite more difficult and less preferred than self-service works really well for academics, because academic staff tend to email a lot. Whereas students, I find, usually are really on board with self-service and portals like this. They actually struggle to open their student emails and would prefer to use a portal. So it does depend a little bit on your audience and who you're working with, of course. But the general rule is we are hardwired to take the easiest path. So the easier we can make something for our customers, the better experience that they will have off the back of it as well, which is the number 2 of the human nature observations, which I wanted to share with you, and leads us now to the third and final one, and my favorite of the 3 actually, which is why I saved it till last, and that is the observation that experience is contagious. Have you ever come into work feeling pretty happy, even though it was a Monday, perhaps, but then sat down next to your colleague and they were in such a bad mood and they were really grumpy about something? It actually had an effect on you and it drained your own happiness and made you a bit grumpy for the day as well. However, have you ever had the opposite, where you're interested in a project but not that fussed about it, and then you end up working with someone on that project who's so enthusiastic and got so much energy for it that it rubs off on you as well? This is an example of how experience is contagious. It's part of human nature. We rub off on one another. I must admit, I did start making this sort of story, so working on it for a while, about experiences contagious before the pandemic, and the first iteration of this slide was called "Humans Are Contagious," and I thought I should probably change that because it's not what I mean. I'm not very relevant at the moment to call it that, but the experience and how we feel is really what rubs off on each other, and we see that day to day when we come to work and in our personal lives as well. So it's no surprise then that there is a correlation between employee experience and customer experience. The organisation Temkin Group did a piece of research in 2017, and they proved this. They found that customer experience was significantly higher when their employees were engaged and happy at work. And that's because employee experience trickles down. If your employees and your team are engaged and happy, they're much more likely to do things like go the extra mile for a customer. They're much more likely to emotionally connect, which is one of the things we were talking about earlier. They're much more likely to just overall give an enhanced experience. And so I feel this really strongly, that customer experience fails unless your employees are engaged as well, because of this trait of human nature that experience rubs off. So how can we do this? If you are a team lead listening, how can you help your teams be engaged? If you are an individual, what can you do to make sure you're engaged at work so that you know what to ask for from your team lead so you can bring your best self from day to day? That's quite a big question to ask. Luckily, there are some experts who have already looked into this for us that I would like to share with you. This is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and I practice saying his name a lot, so I hope I have got it right. Please do someone correct me if I haven't. He's a very esteemed psychologist, and he's spent a lot of time studying optimum engagement and how to get engaged, whether in your professional life or in your personal life. And he found that there is an optimum level of engagement possible, and it's called flow. You might have come across flow before in a different term. Some people call it when you sort of get in the zone or when you're really, focused on something. You know when you're in flow, when you're doing something and time just goes. It's like an hour passes and it feels like 10 minutes. That's when you're in flow. And flow is achieved, and this graph I think shows it quite well, when the challenge of the task that you're doing is perfectly matched by the talents and the skills that you have naturally and that you bring to the table. If you go the other side, so say you're doing a task that is too challenging, too tricky for the experience and the skill set that you have, or you fall into the realm of worry and anxiety. And I'm sure we've all done things at work from time to time that worry us. The other side of that, of course, is if a task is too easy. Maybe it's not easy to other people, but based on our own skill, our own expertise, we outmatch it, and that's when you fall into boredom or even relaxation. Whereas flow is the perfect balance of a challenge that matches your talents and your strengths, while is also challenging enough for you. And it's a really fine balance to tread. We sometimes actually call it in TOPdesk as fine as the gap between the knee of the motorcyclist and the ground when they're cornering around very quickly. I mean, and look at this photo. Like, this guy he's clearly in flow, right? The time he's just so focused on what he's doing, or she, for that matter, actually, and is achieving amazing things as a result. And I'm not saying for one moment that we should always be in flow all the time in work. That would be absolutely exhausting. There will always be things that are boring that we need to do, and there will always be things that worry us that we need to do, and that's totally normal. But to be engaged, there must be at least some opportunities in our professional lives to be in flow, to be in the zone, because that is what keeps us engaged. And it's not, interestingly, the sort of perks of the office, like playing foosball or having, fresh fruits, that kind of thing. And I think the pandemic's taught us that, when we don't have those things, what keeps us engaged is the ability to get into flow and to make the most of our natural skills and talents. So the first step, of course, is to actually know your strengths so that you can get into this flow state. And there's multiple ways you can do that. If you might have a team leader, perhaps, who can help you do that at your organization. You might have teams that work on personal development and progression at your organization that can help you. You can also do psychometric testing as well. At TOPdesk, we use a talent assessment called Strength Finder. It works in a very similar way to many other psychometric and personality testings. But what I really like about this one is it focuses specifically on talents. And you do a survey. I think it takes about half an hour, and fill in all the questions, and it comes up with your 5 top talents that you are intrinsically and naturally good at. And there's lots that you could be. I've put up a table here of all the possible strengths and talents that this test looks at, and they fall largely into 4 domains: executing which is about, making things happen, influencing strength, which are, people who are talented at taking charge, speaking up, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And you'll have your top 5. They might be scattered across all the domains, or they might fall into 1 or 2. And once you know these, you're able then to pursue the tasks and challenges that get you into flow. I'd like to share a personal example of this. So of my top 5 when I took the test, they fell mainly in either the influencing domain or the relationship building domain. My number 1 was actually positivity. One of the reasons why I really enjoy giving presentations is because I love having the chance to sort of be enthusiastic about something and pass that enthusiasm on about a subject that I'm passionate about. And my number 2 one was this one here, individualization, which is being able to understand sort of how people tick and getting a lot of enjoyment of looking at a person's qualities, what they're good at, thinking about how teams can sort of work productively together. So when I had the chance to do this presentation, which is all about sort of human behavior and customer experience, like making this presentation, the time just went because it really tapped into those 2 strengths for me, like positivity and individualization. I didn't really feel like I was working, like an hour would go working on this presentation and it felt like 10 minutes. I was in flow. So that, a nice example of where you can really, if you know your strengths and you know the strengths of your team as well, you can really help them get to that optimum engagement level. So look at yourself, look at your own teams. All of them have talents, have strengths. Once you know these, that's the first step to reaching out to that level of flow. And then without even focusing on customer experience, the happiness and engagement of this team will trickle down to your customers and will have a really good impact on them, because after all, as we've learned, experience is contagious, and happy employees make for happy customers as well. So those are the 3 finishing now that I wanted to share with you. I'll just go over them quickly again. An emotional connection matters more than customer satisfaction. We are hardwired to take the easiest path, and experience is contagious. These sort of, I call them truths about human nature. If you can remember these and keep them front of mind when you are working on projects, working with customers, I promise you it will have a direct impact on your customer experience without even noticing. So I hope you have enjoyed learning about those. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to pass you back over to our host, Tess, now.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thanks, Hannah. That was fabulous. I certainly found myself, you couldn't see me obviously, but I was certainly nodding lots through that. I thought that was brilliant. And your positivity absolutely shines through. So that was a really good example. Thank you. Do you know, I think this is a subject we could run a whole days on. It's just endless. And when you're talking about kind of the emotional connection matters more than customer satisfaction, we did some research at SDI, and during the course of the pandemic, organisations have reported that actually the perception of IT has dramatically increased in the last 18, 20 months. I think that's because of that emotional connection. We were all in the same storm. Absolutely, we weren't in the same boat, but there was the emotional connection that people found they had with each other. I spoke to one organisation and they were saying, the length of calls, the call duration was 3 or 4-fold, because actually people just wanted to connect with each other because people were working remotely. So it's just really interesting that absolutely that emotional connection. And for me, it's absolutely the experience is contagious. But how do you get that experience and emotional connection when you're talking about delivering self-service, delivering stuff remotely? How do you make those 2 things intrinsically linked? So again, fabulous presentation, and we could talk about this forever. I'm sure we'll see you at another event soon. So thanks very much for joining us, Hannah, and take care, and we'll see you soon.
You too as well. Take care.
Thanks, Hannah. Cheers. Bye-bye. Fabulous presentation there from Hannah. So now we have our next session of the day, and we're going to be hearing from Bethany McNally, Business Relationship Support Officer, and Mark Cathro,